If you're dealing with a difficult employee and you're not sure what to say or do without making it worse, this video is for you. I'm going to give you practical guidance that you can use immediately, how to address the behavior, set clear boundaries, and get improvement without turning it into a fight. Hi, I'm Jen, and if we haven't met before, I have 20 years experience in developing leaders and individual contributors and helping them to grow their careers. So if these are the types of tips that you need, make sure you click the like button to let me know. All right, let's be honest. At some point in your leadership journey, you're going to deal with a difficult employee. Maybe they miss deadlines. Maybe they have a negative attitude. Maybe they push back on everything you say. And if you ever thought, why is this person so hard to manage? You're not alone. Because a lot of times, leaders come into their positions without ever being taught how to handle these situations in a practical, real-world way. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to manage difficult employees calmly, confidently, and effectively without damaging relationships or team morale. So let's get into it. Every leader deals with difficult employees at some point. It's not a sign that you're a bad manager. It's just part of the job. And how you handle it is really what matters, because the way you respond sets the tone for your entire team. Not responding isn't an option. Your company has expectations of how you're going to respond to employees. And there are federal, state, and local laws that could apply here depending on your situation. So you have to address this one way or another. But before we talk about the solutions, let's talk about how to avoid the biggest mistakes. And mistake number one is avoiding the issue. Avoiding the issue isn't an option. As we discussed earlier, your company has its own code of conduct that is going to expect you as a leader to handle the situation, as well as, depending on what is going on, there could be laws that would require you to address it as well. Avoiding it and hoping that it's going to fix itself does not work. Mistake number two is overreacting. Sometimes the issue is so frustrating, or it just is the last thing you needed at that moment, and you can feel your anger or your disappointment rising. But acting out on that emotion usually makes things worse. So if you do find yourself in an emotional state, try to take a breather if you can, or if you can't, make sure that your HR business partner is there with you to help. And then mistake number three is being inconsistent. Even if you have the same issue rising up with two different people, it will look different. There will be different circumstances. It is hard sometimes to know exactly how to address it, but regardless of the nuances of their individual situations, you still have to enforce the rules. You can't let things slide, because this only creates confusion and resentment, and it could really impact team morale. Let's get into the tips. The first thing you want to do is identify the root cause of the issue. And here's where great managers stand out. They don't just react to the behavior, they try to understand it. Ask yourself, is this a skill issue? Is it a motivational issue? Is it a personal issue? Is it a communication gap? Because the solution depends on the cause. For example, if it's a skill gap, you coach or you give them resources. If it's an attitude issue, you address expectations and you may need to get HR involved. If it's something personal, you need to lead with empathy as well as identify resources that could potentially help them with this personal situation. Set clear expectations early. A lot of difficult behavior comes with unclear expectations. So get very specific. What does success look like? What are the standards? What are the deadlines? It's hard for someone to argue that they're not meeting expectations when those expectations are crystal clear. But if you haven't set the expectations, you can't assume that they know them. So make sure that you're saying it clearly or having it in writing. And then when expectations are clear, holding someone accountable for behavior becomes fair. So another thing you want to do is have the right conversation. Now let's talk about this conversation that you're going to have with the employee. This is where most people get uncomfortable and where they're afraid that it's going to get confrontational or emotions are going to escalate. But it doesn't have to. Think of it as a clarity conversation. Here's a simple approach. Start with the facts, not with emotions. For example, I've noticed deadlines have been missed for the past 2 weeks. Can you help me understand what's going on? And then pause and listen, and then align. Here's what needs to happen moving forward. Or, here are the expectations that we have. Or, even here is why we need you to miss this. There's a downstream impact. There's another team that misses their deadlines when you miss yours. Make sure that your tone is calm, direct, and respectful. The goal of this conversation is to help them get back on track, not to be critical of them personally. Now, another tip in dealing with difficult employees is having a simple feedback framework. If you're not sure how to give the feedback, start with the situation, explain the behavior, and then identify the impact that behavior has. For example, in yesterday's meeting, when you interrupted multiple times, it made it difficult for others to share ideas. So here, the situation is yesterday's meeting, the behavior is the person interrupting, and the impact is they basically overtook the entire conversation and others didn't get a chance to speak. You could follow with, so what can we do differently next time? This keeps the conversation constructive and not personal. With this particular framework, where you can, give them the opportunity to help identify the solution. If they take ownership of the solution, they're more likely to follow it. Now, the next thing is to stay consistent with boundaries, and this is where trust is built or broken. If you set expectations, you need to follow through. That doesn't mean being harsh. It just means being consistent. And then if the behavior doesn't change, you have to address it again. Document it if you need to. Make sure you're following your company's guidelines. And you can speak with HR on what their expectations are for this situation. But you have to reinforce expectations with the individual, which leads to the next tip. You need to protect the team morale. And here's something that many managers overlook. One difficult employee can and will impact the entire team. If others feel like their poor behavior is tolerated, then your team engagement drops. And if your team engagement drops, productivity will drop as well. So while you're supporting the individual and addressing their behaviors, you're also protecting the team, and they will respect that you're holding this other individual accountable. All right, we have one more tip for you. But before we dive into it, if you're finding this content useful, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell. That way, as we put out more information, you'll be able to get it. All right, the one you've been waiting for. Our final tip. When do you escalate or exit? And yes, sometimes that happens. Despite your best efforts, despite everything that you're trying, sometimes things don't improve. And that's okay. Not every situation is fixable. You are trying to assist this employee in dealing with the issue, but sometimes they don't want the help. If you've already set clear expectations, you've given them feedback, you've provided support and stayed consistent, and there's still no change, it may be time to escalate. Quite honestly, I would say if you have not been partnering with your HR business partner already, now it is critical to do so. But honestly, I would recommend, as things are going, make sure that your HRBP knows what's going on so that if you do get to this point, they're already in the loop and know what's happening. When it gets to that point, go to HR. They can help you to figure out what the next steps are, whether that is any type of disciplinary action or a performance improvement plan, or potentially even letting the person go. Because while we hate to see anyone lose their job, sometimes people just aren't a fit for the role that they're in, and keeping the wrong person will hurt the team long term. But the great news is you don't have to make that decision alone. Your HR team is there to help you. They will be there as a resource for you to deal with the situation. So make sure you're keeping them in the loop. All right. I hope you found this video helpful. Check the description and the pinned comment for additional resources. And if there's anything that you'd like to see a video on that we haven't done yet, feel free to share that in the comments as well. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next video.